Welcome to Concrete Conversations, the Indian real estate podcast. I'm Yash.
And I'm Akshay, and we're the hosts of the show.
Renting a home as a student or young professional in India can be a daunting task. Younger renters, especially in metro cities, are either priced out of suitable accommodation or on the receiving end of structural problems in Indian rental markets.
This gap between demand and supply has historically led to the proliferation of unregulated PGs and hostels, which many young Indians are forced to rely on, in spite of the lack of standardized quality, safety, amenities, and often hygiene.
Today, however, things are slowly changing with the emergence and growth of professionally managed and curated rental options for India's millennials and Gen Zs through both student housing and CoLiving. CoLiving is a community-focused residential format giving occupants professionally managed spaces, standardized services, amenities, and above all, a like-minded community to engage with and belong to.
As the co-living market regains some vigor after a trying pandemic period, we have with us today Rishi Sreedharan, the co-founder and CEO of Hyphen. A civil engineer by education with an MBA from the Fuqua School of Business, Rishi worked in REITs and wealth management in the USA before returning to his family real estate business here in India. Rishi decided to leverage his industry expertise and family legacy to address the lack of quality housing options for younger people in India by founding Hyphen, a community-focused co-living operator.
Hyphen now operates across Delhi NCR, Bangalore and Hyderabad, and aim to enter new subsectors such as student housing in 2023. Today, Rishi talks to us about the need for co-living, the range of offerings in the market, and the prospects for the co-living market in India in the foreseeable future.
So, without further ado, let's dive in to learn the ins and outs of cultivating a co-living community.
So, hi Rishi, good morning. Welcome to Concrete Conversations. I know it's a Wednesday, it's the middle of the week, but I hope that it's been a good week for you so far.
No, of course. Thank you for having me, Yash and Akshay. And yes, it has been a good week. Always a pleasure. Happy to do this. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure.
Perfect. And so, the typical starting point that we have for these conversations is talking to our guests a little bit about their journey and how they got to, the role they're currently working in right now. And I know that you have experience both in real estate and also on the finance side of things. So I thought that we could, start this conversation by hearing a little more about that.
Sure. Happy to kind of get into that. So, I keep saying this to everyone like who I talk to in the business, which is, I've been born and brought up on a construction site, right? So for better or for worse, I can eyeball output from a ton of steel, right? I was telling you this guys the last time as well. It's a great party trick. So
Right.
I guess, and this is by virtue of the fact that my family business has been predominantly in real estate over the last 3 generations. We started out with just pure residential kind of layouts, buying out large tracts of land, cutting them out into smaller pieces and selling. Eventually moved into apartment complexes, eventually kind of commercial office spaces, and then hospitality. So real estate has always been kind of the overarching theme of my life, so to speak. And so to pursue a bachelor's in civil engineering, it was a bit of a no-brainer, right? And through the course of that, got the opportunity to work with a listed developer, here in India. Post that, got the opportunity to look at things business side. So I was kind of technical assistant to a business head over there. And then that gave me a lot of, just insight into large scale ballparking, financial planning, and the why essentially of real estate, right? From a business standpoint.
Right.
That of course gave me a great springboard to kind of pursue my master's in business in this space, right? So ended up moving overseas to pursue that at the Fuqua School of Business. Got the opportunity to then kind of move into REITs, real estate investment trusts, subsequent to dabbling in wealth management on the real estate side. And that helped kind of make a transition into venture capital. So yeah, it's been very interesting. But yeah, like all good things must come to an end. At the time, the firm that I was with was looking to kind of set up shop in Brazil. Obviously, didn't work out at the time because they had large scale strife, they had a lot of issues, politically, and they had a lot of turmoil. So those plans had to get put on hold.
Right.
And yeah, so like I said, why delay the inevitable? So myself and my wife decided, bags packed, dog in tow, kind of moved back. And yeah, jumped right into the family business. And if you've kind of cut your teeth elsewhere outside of the family business, you will realize that, one, if it's a fairly established business, and you have spent some time overseas or outside of that ecosystem, there's not so much you can really give back or take from. It's a well-oiled machine. There's corporate governance in play, and there's not a lot of degrees of freedom. And so the itch was always kind of there to solve a real problem that we, one, understood innately and related to. And so my co-founder, who I'll get to in a bit, and me at the time,
Right.
we were approached by, very serendipitously actually, approached by one co-living operator who came up to us and said, "Hey, why don't you guys develop an asset for us?" And so kind of we dug in, kind of did a bit of research on the space, and so that was what the impetus was for us to kind of jump in. But I can stop for questions if you have any.
No, I mean, I think that's a good kind of break point as well.
Yeah.
I love that you said you were looking for a problem to solve, and I think that kind of works with the next question that we had in mind about the thought process behind starting Hyphen. It's just that people in India, young people especially, they find it quite hard to rent, and this is something I've experienced within like friend circles as well. And it's not just a question of just being maybe priced out of renting an apartment as a young person in India, but also other structural issues that are there as well. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that and how these kind of issues contributed to you looking at Hyphen as your next venture.
Sure. So I think, just to pull it back to that first piece, right, that you addressed in terms of wanting to solve a problem. Uh, Maybe I should preface, right? We didn't think of ourselves as, we didn't take ourselves too seriously enough to think, or that we're some kind of, you had to have a god complex and have to come in and solve the problems. It's just that within the kind of sphere, the spheres of influence where we operate, we felt like there's a lot of stuff that interested us, right? And so, one, it's a deeply commoditized market, right? There's been huge capital pools that have flowed into this segment, but no one's been solving for the experience side, right? And so that was something that we innately understood. When you've kind of stayed overseas, and you've lived in kind of a hostel, or even a just off campus accommodation, or even on campus in some cases, you realize that you never have to take for granted, drinking water, sanitation, safety, some of the first order stuff, right?
Right.
Other than that, obviously, there's the good stuff, which may be thought of as frills here, but there, you take them for granted. They're like, have a 3 a.m. friend,
Right.
or when you move to a new city, so on and so forth. You don't really know where to go, whom to meet, and it's really nice to have that support system, right? And all of these things, you tend to take for granted when you're overseas. And when we came back, we realized no one was doing that. It's such an easy solve.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was a bit of a no-brainer for us to think, hey, maybe we could solve this problem much better, or much more effectively with a consumer lens, right?
Right.
But your question of why folks, aren't able to get a great place to stay, one is, like you said, price point. But even if they have that affordability, there's discrimination.
Right.
You're in a large complex. They don't let you stay there if you're a bachelor or you're a single woman. This is by virtue of the fact that all of these complexes have large families, they're multi-family, etc. So you can't possibly have millennials trying to have a drink, get to know each other, and bring the roof down at, say, whatever, 11 p.m., what have you, right? So there's obviously that very, the practical problems that come with that.
Right.
But additionally, just the supply side isn't built for an asset class like this, right? If you look at the developer side, no one's really solving for this, because it's still a deeply fragmented market. The mom and pop guys will try to kind of build a monolith of, say, a 1 BHK studio type kind of a product, and sort of cluster those together in one building. That's easy to kind of retro and kind of contextualize to our use case, but the supply side isn't large enough for that, right? Even in today's market. So yeah, it's both. It's a problem on either side of that funnel that I think is getting solved significantly, right?
Right. I think you've alluded to this. What I'm going to ask you in this previous answer, a little bit, Rishi. But could you tell us a little bit more in terms of definition what co-living is, and then also what experiential living, the way Hyphen brands it, is, and how that is different from the traditional co-living, and what is the product that Hyphen really brings to the Indian audience?
Sure. So co-living isn't a new term, right? A new term, right? It's existed since kind of the hippie movements, right, of the 80s. It's I think it's community housing, right? At the very essence of it. It just so happens that the end user is mostly between the ages of say 20 all the way up to, especially overseas or in developed markets, in their late 30s, etc. Right? People who don't essentially have kids, need a backyard, etc. People who derive value from each other,
Right.
right? And so from a real estate standpoint, it entails inhabiting a space which is heavily indexed towards the common area, is what a co-living space is, right? That's the hardware of it at the essence.
Right.
How we think of Hyphen is, we like to think of it as through heuristics, right? And to be very honest, we don't see ourselves as just a co-living provider. While our portfolio is very heavily indexed toward co-living, and that's where we found early consumer love, product market fit, what have you.
Right.
We like to extend the gamut of living across, or Hyphen's proposition across typology, right? So whether it's co-living, whether it's student housing, or it's short-term living, or even kind of managed housing for say corporates or employers, etc.
Right.
We don't want to be India's most ubiquitous living community or the largest living community. We want to be India's most loved living community, right? And that's our mission statement, and it's what we carry through across the entire team.
Right.
We want to elevate the Indian consumer's quality of living, right? And how do you do that? It's by driving unparalleled convenience, value, and experience, right? Three of these things. On the convenience front, it's obviously, like I said, we want to have flexible contracts, lower deposit structures, and of course we provide you various typologies. We have a studio type, we have a 1 RK, a room and kitchen, we have a 1 BHK, we even have larger 2 BHK apartments, right? And so we want to be able to serve you as Hyphen across the entire ecosystem.
Right.
And coming back to that convenience, value, and experience front,
Right.
when you allude to value, it sounds like you're speaking of a discount.
Right.
But we like to kind of think of it differently, right? Value is providing a whole lot more for the same price, right?
Right.
And the reason why we're able to do that is because it's derived from our nearly 500-600 page, we have a proprietary sort of handbook, right, that's been built over years,
Right.
with excruciating effort and detail, focusing on the smallest thing, like say what a washer should look like for a table, right? Things like that. And something like that, right? And so where we go into the ergonomics of the space, we're extremely obsessed about seemingly banal stuff like the thickness of a mattress, circadian lighting, for instance, right? So a bunch of that stuff. So it's a consistently powerful hardware experience, and of course we marry that with our world-class service suite, right? Which is just great folks, hospitality standard housekeeping services, right? And even there's an obsessive focus on detail, and just delight.
Right.
We want to be able to know where you like your shoes placed at the end of the day when you come back from a long day's work. So it's the little things, right? And the compounding of those little things, that individualized service at scale and that deep focus on empathy, are some of the pillars of the Hyphen way, right, so to speak.
Right. I like the fact that you brought up value adds. Why don't we just phrase it as sort of let's take a case study, right? If I'm a young professional living in a metro city in India today, let's say I'm in Delhi where you've recently opened up your new club. I come to Hyphen. What would my renting experience be versus finding an apartment on my own? Tell us about the value adds, specifically. What are the tangibles and intangibles I get?
Sure. So I think that ties in really well to the piece, right, that I was talking about, which convenience, value, and I think the third being experience. So assuming, say, obviously you've seen us somewhere, or you've maybe attended an event at one of our clubs with a friend, etc. You decide to enroll. you essentially land on the page. What we do is, because we have this obsessive community focus that I'm talking about, we have an opt-in form, right? So it's obviously very simple, but we like to kind of collect some data on the front end in terms of, hey, some of your value systems, what you like, and it's a dynamic form that changes, right? To give you an example, there's a question which says, hey, how likely are you to come, if we set up an outdoor activity for you, how likely are you to attend, right? And if you're it's a 0 to 10. If you're a 10, we'll ask you specific questions. Kind of, it's the decision tree kind of moves to the types of activities, right?
Right.
So essentially, we're trying to one gamify that experience, where obviously trying to signal that we're a curated community, but we're also kind of eliciting buy-in from you to kind of sit down and kind of give us some information, so you know what to expect from us, right?
Mm-hmm.
You kind of fill that in. We do a bunch of matching on the back end,
Right.
but we also then we have someone reach out to you when we have a space available. A club manager will kind of reach out to you, kind of bring you in for a tour,
Hmm.
kind of show you the space, right? And so, like I said, the hardware experience, all of that. But other than that, there's the community piece, right? That I think will help if we touch on a little bit. To give you an instance, we have a lot of collaborations with the likes of Sofar. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Sofar Sounds.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we do things with, say, a Sofar Sounds, where we'll do kind of a sit down kind of a session with a performer. And a lot of these really sought after events that people are trying to kind of get invited to are in inclusion, right, in the product that you're paying for. And all of these events are pay as you like, essentially, right? So most of them, right? So a lot of it is very open source, to draw that parallel. But so it's a nice little commune, very busy. A lot of this stuff's going on, right? So it's either the cadence is either monthly, bi-weekly, sometimes quarterly, based on kind of interest, stuff like that. But there's also that deep, sort of insightful daily online engagement that you get, right? So through the app.
Right.
So for instance, there's an IoT play, right, in some of our clubs which we're testing, where we're trying to have make sure our members are just better kind of inhabitants, right, of their ecosystem, essentially, right? So we've essentially were able to analyze and read stuff like water consumption at the room level, even at the outlet level, right?
Wow.
And so through the app, we're able to nudge you and say, hey, you've saved so much more water, right? Or you've used so much less water in the kitchen this month. And we gamify that with a badge saying you've saved 3 polar bears and 2 ice caps from melting this month, right? And so
Wow.
yeah, and so eventually what we'd like to do, and this and people signal that, right, on their profile, etc.
Right.
Right.
But eventually what we want to do is try to gamify that, have some cash back in once our community is large enough, where there's some more incremental gains you can eke out of that. There's also a bunch of stuff on the social front, right? So there's just a lot of fun stuff that we can do there, right? There's also discounts that you can see on the platform, and just some really exciting stuff we're working on, right? So that's the kind of the daily stuff in terms of experience on the software front. And then we marry that with kind of the community piece,
Right.
and kind of the physical hardware experience, right? And so that's what makes up the Hyphen suite, so to speak.
I think that that's a fascinating part of this whole product and this whole experience, because community especially is something that is quite important, I feel, for people in their 20s, because usually once you're outside of these structures like college or something like that, it can be quite challenging to find a community of people where you belong. It's not particularly easy to go out and meet new people constantly. So, with that in mind, since there's such a big emphasis on community and also engagement on a day-to-day basis through things like the app, apart from the events and everything like that, what goes into building a community at a hyphen club?
Sure. So a lot of it is I mean, the short of it, Yash, is a lot of it is network effect, right? So once you're at critical mass, which we are in a lot of kind of our some of our spaces in our clubs in say Bangalore, it's just word of mouth, and community kind of grows community, right? So but how we kind of built that flywheel is one focus. like I said, right, focus on delight at all costs, right? When you do that, people will realize that one, the first order basic stuff is taken for granted. They start to take that for granted. Like the ability to take something for granted in itself is luxury, right? Just taking for granted that you will not have something as banal as a power cut or a Wi-Fi, outage and things like that. So,
Right.
because if you look at the incumbents, obviously some of that is outside of their wheelhouse, but as much as possible, even attempting to solve for that hasn't been done, right? So when we've done that, people signal that. um, but more than anything, I think what we like to kind of focus on what they want, right? Put them front and center. So to give you an example, we had this thing where we had WhatsApp groups, right? And people saying, hey, you're at this club, you're located here, I'm in location A, you're in location B, there's location C that's somewhere in the middle, let's meet for a football game, right? So we try to game that, we try to influence that a little bit, but then eventually we step back, right? And so what started out as, just a few months ago, was a small WhatsApp group of a couple of, say, soccer, tennis, and even like cricket enthusiasts, has now started to grow into like an inter-club competition. People saying, hey, why don't we get jerseys? And it's a whole thing, right? So after which, and we later realized that, hey, we don't have anything to do with this anymore. It's just gotten out of hand, and they don't need us or care for us anymore. And I think, and that's the way we like it, right? We like to kind of seed or germinate that, but not really influence it in a way where we're in your face about it, right? Other than that, we just, I like to think like we're something of an uprising, right? So we have to make sure we're Gen Z focused, we're plugged in, we're well acquainted, always in the know, right? When it comes to things like even the best shindigs, and I don't know if that's a relic term, but yeah,
No, no, we're familiar. We're familiar with shindigs. No, not to worry.
We're on our
but
way
yeah,
to
like,
being relics ourselves, Rishi, so
Yeah.
it's all good.
but yeah, no, to your point, right? So we hire, because there's certain things you don't understand about Gen Z, so you hire Gen Z, right? So our average age just in the office is, I think, 24.
Right.
It's all pure Gen Z, and so that's how you engage the community. Other than that, for us, it's we shy away from being thought of as an exclusive community. We just like to think we're inclusive, right?
Right.
Which is exactly why we're across every single typology, every single price point. um, where in a 15,000, or say even a 13,000 or a 12,000 rupee per month price point versus even a 45-50,000 rupee per month price point, right, for a single bed. And so yeah, so these are some of the tiny ways in which we kind of just signal for brand, signal for community, and things like that. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. And I just want a quick follow up here because you said something about price points, which was something I was thinking about. But you said you're in every price point. Just to clarify, is it the price point varies depending on what product
Yes.
you select, or is it depending on what location you choose? How does it really work?
It's a bit of both, but it's very unlikely for us to have a really high margin or a high ticket product in a low ticket geo, right, a location,
Right.
right? So it's usually very likely that you will be in a studio, etc., and so that's why the price point is more accessible versus, say, a larger 1 BHK/2 BHK, which is in a more expensive kind of area, which is what will cost that premium.
Right, right, right. With this in mind, since you've talked about having a variety of price points, and you said something interestingly that not going to be a very high margin ticket size in many of the markets you're in. What is Hyphen's vision, and what, in Rishi, in your mind, is the scalability of this model? What is it that you're looking for?
I think, like I said, right. So we get asked this question a lot, which is the TAM, the total addressable market, deep enough, right?
Right.
Uh, the fact is that when we're not trying to solve for, say, blue collar, right? While I think that's a great product to go after, a great end user to go after, that's just not our expertise today.
Right,
And the operative word being today, right?
right,
I think what we want to do is just this, right? Which is, the rental market is commoditized today, right? So we want to be able to, kind of hack that commoditized kind of rental living paradigm through the consumer lens.
Right.
In order to deliver excellent product, you have to make sure you you justify it through price, or let's say the other way around, you have to justify it a decent price through great service, great product. And to do that, we have to start focusing on product, right? We have to start focusing on the consumer, put the consumer first. So I think one of our goals is we want to kind of lead by example and show people that you will be able to produce a high quality product, you will be able to drive differentiated value and provide a great proposition just by focusing on product and maybe pricing a little bit more.
Right. I think this flows pretty well into another question that we had in mind. And since we are talking about, the differentiation in product and consumer price point, I wanted to talk to you about another sub-segment of this, kind of rental market that we're discussing today. And that is student housing. So I know that Hyphen is, looking to enter student housing now as well. And it's obviously a big market in India right now. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of the product and price point, what are the differentiating factors between something like the experiential living that you guys are talking about at Hyphen versus a student housing offering that you may be able to offer, whether in conjunction with educational institutes or independently?
Sure. So I think, I mean, like you rightly said, right? Student housing is one extremely interesting for us because it's an adjacent business, right? It's the revenue profile is similar but also different in that kind of the cash flows locked in for say a quarter, etc., or half year or a year as opposed to month on month. So from a consumer standpoint, it's not as flexible because say a co-living or say a working professional or a digital nomad, what have you,
Right.
on a co-living product can come in and leave in 3 months. A student usually is locked in, right? And but that is by virtue of it, that comes from kind of from the demand side, which is they'd rather be locked in, right? They want surety, they want stability.
Right.
But how we're in terms of price point, I think it's very similar, right? I think very similar to co-living. There are different student housing providers that kind of serve the entire gamut, right? There's a discount PG, there is a blue collar equivalent in co-living. There are PGs here,
Right.
not very compliant, etc. There's also kind of a more like say other co-living kind of incumbents who are kind of like, we like to call them PG plus, that are trying to standardize those PGs for say a nominal price premium. And there's also kind of the kind of apartment complexes, etc., that a lot of students after the first year outside of a PG kind of move out to. They congregate, say, pay a deposit together, and they split a 3 BHK, etc., right? So uh, what we like to, how where Hyphen is, if that was your question, is we are again, we take that same consumer focus. We are accessible in terms of price point. We will be more accessible. I mean, as accessible or maybe a few percentage points higher. But the product again is an order of magnitude better, right? Again, just when we do, like for example, on the community front, if you do something with a SOMAD, or if you do the SOFAR and things like that, here we'd probably something like a TEDx, right? Or we'd kind of talk to kind of startup founders from the alma mater to come back in and engage the community, things like that, right?
Right.
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 Before Akshay asks his question, I just wanted to say, Rishi, that I'm having to look at my college dorm experience in a very different light now.
Yeah, me too. I think we're always talking about this a lot internally and saying, man, I wish. So when we talk to a bunch of our investors about this, they're like, and a lot of them are from the DU area. They're like, I wish Hyphen was around when we were here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Especially, I think in a country where, like India, where especially for students, accommodations are far and few to choose from, and then the choices that they actually even have are just often very, very disappointing.
Yeah, so if you take kind of the DU example, right, they have about 70 students coming in every year. But the fact is that they have less than 1,000 kind of official, say, hostel, university accommodation, right? So
Yeah.
by virtue of that, the opportunity was huge for a lot of PGs to kind of come in over the years. They've kind of built that entire kind of asset class out. There's very, very like these tiny non-compliant kind of buildings, that are a huge hazard, to be very honest,
Yeah.
to the student community at large. And so, yeah, we're trying to kind of standardize some of that. Some of it will remain. We're not trying, it's not zero sum, right? So we're not trying to completely um, eradicate that, but we're saying a lot with upward mobility, people willing to spend on experience, we're just taking that similar heuristic here.
Right.
There and of course it's still a horses for courses kind of strategy, because
Right.
it has to be very, very specific to the TG.
Yeah, I think that segues right into what I was going to ask you next, because I was planning to go a little off book, Rishi, and talk to you about the entrepreneurial experience that you've had with Hyphen, because I think that's where the meat of the interesting discussion lies. And since you talked about, horses to courses, can you tell us maybe what has been the most interesting challenge you faced, either with the customers or with on the business side of setting up Hyphen, and how you overcame it, or,
Sure.
or maybe something that you haven't yet overcome, but you're strategizing to work on?
Sure. So, I mean, where do I begin, right? Sure, so, to be honest,
It's a loaded question. You have to
yeah.
choose only one. No, I'm just joking.
No, I mean, because when you say you can't really
Separated.
yeah, one is that, and the other thing is entrepreneurship is just, and you've heard this, I'm sure, right? It's just super high highs and super low lows, right? So
Yeah.
maybe we
Yeah.
can, when we kind of started out, it was when we were trying to fundraise, or when we were trying to kind of bootstrap this thing, and I'll kind of start with then eventually sometime middle, and then where we are today. So when we started this out, when we were kind of, like I said, a lot of people who kind of came up to us always asked me this question: hey, this maybe looks like your passion project, right? Are you sure you can follow this through, right? And I'm sure a lot of people who come from business backgrounds, who are trying to kind of set up something outside of that world, face, right?
Right.
To kind of overcome and to explain to people, explain to our, even a lot of our investors, that hey, we're not just doing this to try something out. We truly believe in this passionately enough to kind of stake everything, right? There is no safety net here, like it's always this question that we always get, is that okay, it's cool, man, but what you're doing at the end of the day is you're solving for fancy PGs, right? That's one way to think of it. The thing is, I mean, sure, I mean, that's a great heuristic to think of, right? Like the way to think of it, which is it's fancy PGs, but fact is, we want to essentially elevate the experience of a consumer, right? So
Right.
even if someone is willing to pay, even has 8, 9, 10,000 rupees a month to spare, or even if it's a 6,000 rupee PG, right? They just deserve a better experience.
Right.
And so when we kind of jumped into that, a lot of people didn't understand it, right? But we're now realizing that demand exists across the board, right? And that was something that we doubted a whole lot, right? But I'm glad we kind of stuck through it, right? And so we've reaped a lot of those rewards.
Right.
I mean, I could go on, but like another challenge, which is operationally day to day, is figuring out things like, hey, how do you ensure things don't break across? We across one, when we started out, it was 20 people, then it was 200, and now it's inching on 2,000, right? So
Wow.
how do you kind of make sure people wake up without with water in their bath, with the tiny things, right? The operational, not so sexy stuff, but also marry that with these lofty things that we've set out to do, right? And try to do that consistently, right? Consistency is luxury, and to kind of provide that across this large subset and scale that to 20,000 hopefully over the next couple of months. That's been I think a challenge, that's an interesting challenge that's presented itself.
Right.
Right. And before Yash asks this question, I just wanted to say, you said fancy PG,
Yeah.
and I like the fact that you brought that up, because we have a fancy term for this as
Right.
well that we've discussed. It's an industry term, but it's real estate as a service, which is
I have heard of this term.
yeah, which is something that gets tossed around a lot, and I think it is kind of applicable in a sense to this asset class as well.
Yeah. I think it's more of an, when you take that X for Y type of, trying to draw comparisons, it's good to explain to VC side. I've seen a lot of my friends in the industry, kind of conform to real estate as a service. Yeah.
Right. And since you were talking about consistency and scale, I had another kind of business side question that relates to that. And that was about purpose built structures. So, obviously, at the start, I'm guessing that, starting out Hyphen, you would have to work with existing structures. But as you scale, and if you're looking to do something like this on a maybe pan India scale with a completely consistent product, how important is it to Hyphen to have, or in the future to have purpose built structures for your clubs?
So, I mean, that's a great question, Yash. And that is, I mean, to answer very quickly, it's very, very important. It is everything, right? So,
Right.
that's kind of the North Star for us. And right now, we have a large purpose-built pipeline, right? So, every other day, we've got our acquisitions team dealing with a bunch of developers across the board. Right? We have developer partners who've actually, in many cases, whose buildings we've kind of leased, and who now realize that, okay, we're growing and we're interested in kind of, chipping at that block a little bit more. And so they're very, very interested in purpose building assets for us, right? And so
Right.
just by virtue of that, we got close to what, 3,500 beds in the pipeline under construction as we speak, that'll go live over the next couple of months in purpose built form.
Wow.
The thing is that, um, you know but one is build to rent, right? So it's very similar. Like, you would build to sell, this is a build to rent asset class. And as people realize that the annuities are great, like I've always kind of beaten this dead horse, right? It's a simple, predictable, free cash flow generative business.
Right.
You will see kind of one just kind of early adopters kind of jump in on small scale early adopters up to say 100, 200, maybe even 600, 700 beds, kind of jump in and build out assets, right? And so those are the people we're talking to, and we've been able to kind of elicit a lot of buy-in just from a product standpoint, right? Because there's a lot that goes into kind of building that hardware out, building it the way we want. Like I said, because we exact such high standards from an asset. So just building out the manuals, building out our product spec over the last couple of months, like I said, with extreme fastidious detail, has helped give them kind of a blueprint of what to build out, right? So they know what to expect at the get-go. Eventually, once these all go live, and we also are talking to a lot of just institutional cap on the supply side. Once that comes in, it will become very, very easily like readable, like we've talked about before.
Right. Perfect. And I think that kind of, rounds off our conversation for today quite well. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Rishi, for your time and for explaining this concept of co-living in an Indian context to us. It's been quite enlightening to me to know that, and it's quite heartening as well to know that there are options for people my age now to have a good quality of life, as you said, without a lot of the hassle that is associated with finding a place in India.
Of course, I'm glad.
I totally just to piggyback on what Yash said. Thank you so much, Rishi. I think now Yash will definitely be more open to considering moving to Bangalore or Delhi if he needs to.
unless you'll be opening a Hyphen in Bombay soon, which would be the best.
Bombay is way, 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 way too expensive, but yeah, we're definitely working on something there.
Yeah, that's something I think we all know all too well, unfortunately.
I know. Yeah, but no, thank you guys. Appreciate your time as well, and I hope this was a good use of your time.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Concrete Conversations on Instagram to know more about upcoming episodes and for some behind the scenes content.
For more deep dives into the world of Indian real estate, stay tuned for more Concrete Conversations.